We asked Chris right before the break some of his favorite memories. I think the Utah game is going to come up for everybody. The Kevin Huerter 3 was just so massive, and I wasn't there at the arena for that moment, but I saw the response from people. Like this might be the loudest the Golden One Center ever was for that 3, because it was loud on TV.
Yeah, I remember it like that. That was the first time I've been in there, and it felt like it was sort of like the building was kind of vibrating.
Mm.
Which was, but that also happened Saturday when De'Aaron Fox had the steal and the dunk. I think that was to go ahead in the first. That was the first time they took the lead in the fourth quarter of that Dallas game too. So yeah, I mean, man, it's gonna be. But I hate to bring it back to the Warriors, but like I think what the Kings could have in the playoffs this year in terms of environment is going to be better than the We Believe Warriors stuff in 2007. Like that, it's been much longer for the Kings. Like just the ending a streak, I think, is always the most fun part about like being a fan in sports. Like being like the situation the Kings fans have now is like it's never gonna feel like when they make the playoffs, it's never gonna feel like that again. Right. Because like you went to Oracle in 2007 and it was like completely electric, and a large part of that was because it had been so long since fans had seen it. But like the third Kevin Durant year, even though that was arguably one of the best teams of all time, there wasn't near that level because it's like, all right, everyone's kind of used to watching them just kind of destroy everybody. So like the atmosphere this year and this spring, I think, is going to be the best it's going to be until there is maybe potentially a run to, deeper rounds in the playoffs.
I agree. I think I'm like the only one that really holds on to this memory. I thought especially like in the totality, the final like 3 minutes of that Pistons game, I thought that was lit. They went crazy at the end of that Pistons game, and I just remember the big moment was they came back, and I think they were up by 1 or something like that, and they had Fox had a pick and roll with Sabonis. Sabonis kind of slipped the screen. It was a pocket pass to Sabonis. Sabonis found Kevin Huerter in the corner for a 3, and Kevin hits it. The place goes crazy, and then Kevin just walks to the bench. Ain't no jog back. He just had this little walk with a strut.
Kayvon,
and they was going nuts. That's one of the top memories for me. I mean, also you probably had some guy on the court side that was looking sheepish after that shot.
In his Pistons jacket. Yeah, he wasn't too happy. He wasn't too happy.
Kevin's got some swag to him.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah. He definitely does. Well, all right. We bring up the Pistons. We don't have to ignore the game on November 30th.
No.
The Pacers, like everybody was ready for the Pacers game. And remember, the Kings had lost 3 in a row entering that game.
Yep.
And Tyrese got his got his applause, and then they called Shabano's name. And my goodness, that crowd let him have it. And they were on Shabano's neck all game. And if I remember correctly, the first quarter was close. And then the Kings kind of stepped on the gas a little bit in the second half. This started to be around the time where it was becoming clear, especially in person, that there was something wrong with De'Aaron. Mm-hmm. You would catch De'Aaron kind of, James would talk about this a lot, like the way he would walk back to the huddles of the locker room, you just knew like something's not right with De'Aaron. And he got that vibranium or something in him for that fourth quarter, and he was cooking.
That was
the defensive end and the offensive end.
That was
with the Dream Shake.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
That was around the time that De'Aaron settled on a certain footwear brand after moving around a little bit.
Yeah,
that's when he.
That Pacers game also had the. Remember, it was a heck of a moment too. They went crazy and go to one center where TD had a steal and a dunk, and then Malik stole it and gave it to alley-oop. They went crazy for that one. That was crazy too.
Malik those two combined for 35 in that game.
Wow.
Malik and Terrence had a combined 35 in that one.
played
almost as many as Terrence had, or a little bit more than Terrence had on national television.
Man, that game was crazy.
Have you guys talked about the Brooklyn game?
No, that was our first reference of it. Is that one right there?
Yeah, that one. I mean, 153 to 121. The fact that like it was kind of talked about a lot. The fact that that was a TNT game. Like I was kind of surprised at how much that was like a topic. But I guess since they never come here, like it was a bigger deal than I anticipated. Yeah, to hang 153. That game was wild.
Wasn't it about like 4 or 5 years since they got a TNT game? I think it was somewhere around there.
Yeah, you guys would know better than me.
Boogie's first game back in Sacramento, I think, was the last one they got on. No, they got like a Clippers game later too. Something like that, though.
I'm looking at the record real quick. 2-4, 5, 6. So the Kings, okay, they had just gotten above 500, but that was their fourth win in a row. That was their fourth win in that 7-game win streak that they had, that Brooklyn game.
Yep.
They had just beaten the Warriors. And I know, like, I'm a broken record with this one. Go back a couple of nights, that Laker game. I love De'Aaron Fox in that Laker game. They fought at crypto to get that one. And that will, it's not the flashiest, especially because it was on the road. But if you remember Fox's performance, I'm not going to say that was the birth of fourth quarter Fox, but man, he made sure the Sacramento Kings won that game against the Lakers that night.
32, 12, 7, and 2 in that one for De'Aaron.
Wow.
What he said? You said 32 and 12 and 7?
Yep.
Jeez. Good.
You know what moment should be bigger, but they stole it from us? Terrence Davis's dunk in the first game.
Oh yeah, that would have been something.
If you can remember the like game scenario, that dunk brought, like, it felt like, okay, here we go. This is the push we've been waiting for from the Kings. Like they're right there now. I think it was a 2-point game when Terrence dunked it.
Yeah.
And they called a technical foul. They get the free throw out of it, and then it was whatever. But that dunk should have been bigger than it was. But that you talk about setting the tone for the season. The official set the tone for the season with that technical foul on Terrence Davis.
Yeah.
It broke a 104 tie with 2:18 left. So it was an offensive rebound by TD and then a dunk, and to give the Kings a 2-point lead in the first game of the season. And he looked at him and yelled, like didn't even like directly like it wasn't that demonstrative. He just yelled in the direction of Dame and got the T. I felt for TD on that one.
Yeah, that was tough. That was definitely tough, man.
We didn't even get to see the beam that night.
We didn't. Hey,
there were 17,000 people at the arena who may not have known that the beam existed.
When did you notice the beam, Chris? You remember?
We talked about it with them before the season started, and I didn't even give it any mind. They're like, "Oh yeah, we're doing this thing this year after wins. We're like going to light a beam. It's going to be this new thing." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I didn't even realize that, like, it didn't cross my mind that it would resonate as like a big thing for the season. But no, it's turned into it. It's a cool thing, man. The thing is with gimmicks like that, I love gimmicks that involve winning and that fans can enjoy without having to buy stuff. You know, like I love when fans can just enjoy something that's cool without having to spend $28 on a panda hat or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like just as an example, but like I think stuff like that is cool.
Yeah, baby giraffe. Nobody
exactly.
Baby giraffe hat in this situation. So, I was trying to think. It's funny, we talked about it yesterday. That Warriors game that they ended up winning. I'm pretty sure they lit the beam that night, and nobody. I don't remember it. I never looked to the sky, not once. Nobody did. I think the first time I really noticed it was, ironically enough, the first time I was like, let me go see the beam was after De'Aaron's shot against Orlando. Because I think it had been talked about a little bit, and then they won. And I would think I was halfway to downtown, and Reese was in the car. He's like, "Oh, that means the beam's up. Let's go look at the beam." And we went and saw the beam. But that De'Aaron Orlando game, jeez, That was a moment right there. This dude pulled up from the logo, splash, game time. We out of here. That was a moment.
And they were down 20 in that game. And fought their way back and was that was the game where Malik turned it over, right?
They turned it over. A live ball turnover led to a dunk to tie it.
To tie the game.
Timeout. 5 seconds left. De'Aaron just goes down the
walked
court.
It up.
Yeah.
And Kamara said, I looked at the guy next to me and I said, he gonna pull up.
There wasn't even no time to even say that.
He gonna pull up right here. You're listening to D-Lo and KC, along with our man Chris Biederman here on KIFM West Sacramento 98.5 FM, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, ESPN 1320. Always live on the free Odyssey app. Chris, we'll ask you this because this has been a fun question because it was asked of Monty on Monday. So we're talking about the moments that are fun and we remember, and like we haven't even. I think both Cavs games are very, very memorable for their own reasons as well. But was there a particular moment, Chris, where you thought, "Oh man, I think this team might be good"?
Yeah, that road trip. I was just looking back at it. Like they beat Cleveland, which was a big win after losing to Milwaukee, and then they dropped the Knicks game, which they have a tendency
that was
to
an
do.
ugly one.
Yeah, that was an ugly one, and then they lost to Philadelphia, which was another ugly one. But I was in Toronto and Detroit for those next two. And the Toronto game was tough because Fred VanVleet was going off and they were making a comeback at the end. It was a game that I remember the Kings were playing pretty well, but they were able to hold off a pretty good team. Like, I know Toronto hasn't had the season I think that they envisioned having, but like holding off a team with like championship pedigree on the road and getting some clutch buckets and winning that game by one felt like an important thing at that point. And then they went and handled business in Detroit. When did I know this team was good? Man, that's tough.
Do you think they're good?
Yeah, I think they're good. No. I think they're good. Like going to Minnesota and winning the second game in overtime after Domantas Sabonis fouled out. I think was a moment too. And I'm not a huge believer in the Timberwolves, but just, after losing the first one the way they did and then sort of responding by particularly, like, I know I mentioned the Trey Lyles thing. Maybe I'm talking about Trey Lyles too much, but Trey Lyles coming in and being really physical with Rudy Gobert. And, there was a point where early in overtime, I think it was the first defensive possession, he just boxed out Gobert and the ball fell kind of close to him on the rebound. But like, he was more focused on boxing out Gobert and did a really good job of it, allowing somebody else to come get the rebound. And then he drew a foul on Gobert on the offensive glass on the other side. And that was like, all right, because at that point in the year, there was so much discussion about the backup big and like, how important that spot was. And the Kings don't really have an answer after trying all these guys. And it's like, they're going to Trey Lyles. Like, Mike Brown's coming from the Warriors, where one of the most significant moves that they made was playing Draymond Green at center. And I'm in no way comparing, the Warriors making that move in the finals to Trey Lyles playing in overtime against Minnesota in January or whenever that was. But like, that to me is going to be something that I think we just see a lot more of. And I think the Kings can be really difficult to defend, even with Domantas Sabonis off the floor. If you get, De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk or TD, Kevin Huerter, Keegan Murray, Harrison Barnes, if you're playing, 5 out with Trey Lyles at the 5 spot, you're probably not going to be that great defensively with your low man and your rotations and rebounding and all that stuff. But you're going to be really difficult to defend, and ultimately that could be a net positive for the second unit if you need it. So I think getting a win in overtime without Domantas Sabonis in that spot, going up against a high-profile center and Rudy Gobert, is something that'll stand out to me as maybe one of the more like underrated moments of the season, particularly if Trey Lyles ends up getting more time at the 5 spot in big games.
The one thing that I'm starting to realize with Chris, with Ham, even with Monty McNair, is that people's thought that this was a good team. It happened a little later than mine, right? Like the Minnesota was like 2 weeks ago. The Jazz game was like a month ago. I thought they were good after the Nets game. I was like, nah, they're different. Like this, this is crazy what they're able to do. And it didn't seem like nobody Terrence went off. He had 30 something, but it's not like they had the 4 guys with 30. It was just everybody was able to score. Everybody was able to put in their 15 to 20 or something like that. And I was like, nah, it's different with this group. I guess I thought it earlier than most, but Chris isn't alone. Like a lot of people, maybe in the last month, are just like, nah, it's for real. I thought that in November.
Yeah, like as good as some of those stretches were, and I mentioned like that Toronto and Detroit game, like they came home and then lost to Charlotte. Then they beat the Lakers and then lost to Washington. So there were some elements of like, all right, they still got some maturing to do for sure. But I'm with you in that like the talent and the roster seem to make sense. Like even early on, and even going back to last year, like Domantas Sabonis's first game, I forget who they played, but it was like, oh, this roster makes a whole lot of sense now. Like De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis were in the 2-man game. That just makes sense. You surround these guys with shooters. You could be onto something. That was apparent early in the year, but like midway through when they're losing games to Charlotte and Washington and, Atlanta at home, and even that Lakers game, what was it, January 7th? Like there were still some moments where you're like, man, they got some maturing to do. But I think they're getting there. Like I think they're like, I would be surprised if going down the stretch after the All-Star break, if they're going to have a whole lot of letdown games right now, because I think they understand the type of urgency that they need to have, particularly after playing in games like, Dallas against Dallas, which was a playoff vibe. And, even at Phoenix, the guys were talking about that one feeling like a playoff game. Like those are the types of games that they're going to be in basically the rest of the way. And they're not really going to have an opportunity to let their foot off the gas against teams like Washington and Charlotte and whoever else. Like they realize now, given particularly after everybody loaded up at the trade deadline, like they don't have that margin for error anymore. They need to like maintain that level of intensity, and hopefully for their sake, they learn those lessons early on, because that's going to be the next step for them.
Yeah, Monty mentioned he mentioned the Jazz, right? And that was the December 30th game. And you forget the Rumble in the Jungle and the Thrill of Manila in the Manila took place right before that, in that slugfest with the Nuggets.
Yeah.
They had the 27th and 28th slugfest against the Nuggets, where they beat the Nuggets by they beat the Nuggets 128 or 127 to 126. Yeah. And then they beat the Jazz 126 to 125, and that came after the first game against the Nuggets, which was it was another fist fight.
In the real quick thing, in that first game against the Nuggets, no Sabonis, he had just broken his thumb. They blew a 20-point lead. In the second game, they were down 19 in the third to win the game.
And of course, and I think Sabonis came back for that one, right? Like the first Nuggets game was the only one that he missed. He was like, oh, can't do that anymore.
Yeah, he had 31, 10, and 5 on his first game back.
With a broken freaking hand. Just tape it up. Throw me back out there.
One other thing that our guy Cam Salerno pointed out after the Dallas game on Saturday was that the Kings in those miniseries, they're 5-0 in the second game of those. In those, like when they play the same team on back-to-back games. And so, I don't know that like that means they're going to be good in a playoff setting where you're playing the same team in a series, but I think it speaks to like maybe like Mike Brown's good at, one, making adjustments, two, potentially like the messaging to his team, like, hey, these are the things we need to work on. This is what we need to do to bounce back from that loss we just had, which also speaks to generally like Mike Brown's experience. Like that's ultimately a huge thing for the Kings, is they have a coach who's coached a lot of high level players in a lot of high leverage scenarios. And that's going to be, that I think gives me a lot of confidence in this Kings team too. It's like, it's a first year of a coach, but it's not a first time head coach, right? Like, and Monty Williams said that in Phoenix, like, yeah, it's a first year coach, but this is a dude who's been around the block, who's still one of the best coaches in the league. Monty Williams said that, which resonated with me for sure. But I think that's one thing that the Kings have going for them, is just the ability to look at, a scenario where you're playing the same team in back-to-back situations, where you can make adjustments and change the messaging and all that stuff.
They got 2 of those one against OKC, one against Portland, both on the road. And the other thing I wanted to say real quick, Damien, saw the practice that I did with the final games, and I went very pessimistic, just for argument's sake, with the record. I had them going 12-13 if they went 12-13 in the final 25, 44-38. What if they do what the percentage has them doing what they've done this year? Their winning percentage this year. What if they win it? They could potentially be a 50-win team this year.
Yeah.
Going 12-13, they're 44-38. If they play up to what their percentage is right now, that's probably 49, maybe 50 wins on the season. Yeah. That's crazy.
It's a tough schedule down the stretch. I'm looking at it right now.
It does.
You got OKC, the Clippers, Minnesota, the Pelicans, at the Suns again. You got an East Coast trip. It's actually not that bad aside from the travel, but you got Chicago, Brooklyn, DC, and Utah on the way back, and then you host Boston.
I had them lose any game on that schedule that Chris probably just mentioned. I had them losing them all, and they still finished 12-13.
Yeah.
Like that's who they are. I just argument's sake, just lose any tough game. I only didn't have losing back-to-backs.
What was the over-under coming in the season? Wasn't it like mid-30s?
33.5.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That was a betting. And I remember Trista came on that day, but easy money.
Yeah.
Take it. 33.5. Like take the over. And you could take the over under on whether Chris Biederman's going to join us when we return. Really not